Hey guys, welcome to a Purple Political Talk Livestream. Today is Friday, so today is not our usual livestream day. But as you guys may know, I was in Mexico over, Tuesday when I usually do these live streams. So I wasn't able to do a live stream. So I kind of decided, well, I think I still should, give everyone kind of an update. We can chat about politics for around an hour, and I thought it would be really great. So I think that it's going to be very interesting. And, there's a lot of things to talk about. I mean, the country has taken a complete 180 turn over the last 2 weeks. It's been completely insane. I mean, things have really gone south for the Biden administration, and I think it's at a pretty bad level. Anywhere from approval ratings, national security, a lot of different things that I want to talk about today, because I think that these are going to be influential parts, right, of the coming days, the coming months, and the coming, years. And it's really going to be dependent of, what ends up happening. And I think at this point in time, Joe Biden is not at the same place that he was a couple of months ago. He's not in the same place he was a couple of weeks ago. And, as we go on in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about, a lot of the different things that I think are going to be impacting the Biden administration and moving on towards 2022. So I'm seeing right now some, people in the chat. Soapmore was here pretty early. I saw Political Playground here earlier, American Predictions, Among Us. So thank you guys so much for coming, and I'm assuming more people are going to show up eventually. But we're going to see, I'm going to start answering questions like I usually do during these live streams. So let's start out with a question. Do I think the Taliban will attack us tomorrow? I do not think that will happen. I mean, at this point, I think that there's likely not going to be a 9/11 attack tomorrow. It's something that every year has been brought up as a possibility. And, 9/11 is a pretty bad day for America. I mean, not only in its 2001 form, which is horrific, but there's other famous 9/11s in American history just because of how, bad of a date it has been for Americans. Now, I do think that national security in certain ways is to a point where it's going to be very hard for something like that to happen. Now, I don't think that right now we're seeing the Taliban is likely not going to attack. I think the Taliban has different issues right now. The Taliban, if we really do think about it at an international relations point of view, what do they want? They want to be recognized as the official governor of Afghanistan. So then they could do what? They could make money, they could get rich, they could do whatever they want with their country. And ultimately, I don't think the Taliban has no interest in the United States no more. They're really focused on controlling their government. I think that the Taliban, not defending them or anything, they have different problems right now, and I think the U.S. is certainly not one of those. So yeah. American Predictions asked, is there any chance of us getting nuked in the next 50 years? Who knows? I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what will really happen in 50 years like this, because this is completely unpredictable. We really can't, predict this. There's other things we can predict, but I think this is one of the harder things to predict. Ronald Reagan asked, will Trudeau lose? And I mean, I think this is something that's become more interesting because it's really funny how the Canadian elections have been turning out, where Trudeau called the snap election to, try to save his government and make sure that he had a better and advantage when it came to the government in Canada. Now, I do think that this in many ways has backfired, where we're seeing, the Trudeau campaign and the Liberal campaign struggle to get votes. And it's not the same thing that the polls were saying. So I think it's looking pretty bad, considering that, the Conservative Party and other fringe parties could add seats and make a coalition. I think it's likely that he loses at this point, but who knows what happens. Let's see. Am I moving more to the left or the right, or neither way? So, right now, based on where the country is, as an independent, my political views have moved to the right, because I feel like as an independent, the Biden administration has been moving too much to the left. And I don't think it's so much I moving to the right, but, the left moving further away. So in the process, I'm getting pushed further to the right. But, there's a lot of things to talk about. And I mean, the first thing I want to talk about, vaccine mandates. I mean, hear me out. I am someone who's very pro-vaccines. If you haven't gotten your vaccine, go get it. It's something that could really help out, something that, could be very important to, the public health. And I think that that vaccines are important, and there's no way of hiding that. However, hear me out. I think that it's also necessary for the government to stay away from people's health in that certain of ways. And yeah, there's been vaccines, and I get that, but vaccine hesitancy. I don't blame people. This has been a vaccine that has been rushed, and if people have their hesitations, they should be able to wait back. Now, I mean, I don't think they should segregate them from society, or to the point where they can't leave their house, to the point that they get fired or terminated, like Biden is trying to do. So, I really do think that at this point in time, we're looking at essentially, at, I guess, a very bad situation, because, I think that it's pretty tough that the government is, coming in. I think it's pretty much, and it's dictator-like. And I mean, I know this, personally, coming from Venezuela, that the government, if they want to get really annoying and they want to get really pushy of what they want, they're going to do it. And the Biden administration, I don't like to, say a lot of things, but at this point in time, I'm going to say that some of the things they're doing with COVID are more dictatorial. And to be honest, I think at some points it's not necessary, because the people that have gotten the vaccine already are like the people that are going to get the vaccine. If you start forcing people, it's going to make people more hesitant to get the vaccine. And one of the things that I think a lot of people do not talk about is that the vaccine hesitancy is affecting certain groups of voters that the Democrats have tried to protect for so many times, and they're making policies that are really hurting them. I'm talking about African American voters. That is a group of voters that currently, we're seeing the Democrats kind of attack with vaccine passports and things like that. So, generally speaking, I think that's something that's really, shifted me. So sorry for going on a little bit of a tangent. Let me move on with the next question. Let's see. Can you do a live stream for September 20th Canada election? I'm planning on doing that. I'm planning to make a thumbnail and upload the live stream kind of link soon. I'm going to do that probably tomorrow or on Sunday. I'm really excited for the Canadian elections, and it's something that, outside of U.S. politics, is something that I've been really excited for. So that's going to be something that's very interesting. Let's see. The left is moving away from the center. That is precisely what's happening. And I mean, there's a lot of different factors, and we're going to get to those topics. I want to see what you guys think about these topics as we move forward in, this live stream. The economy, the, foreign policy, immigration, all of these things. The left is moving to the left, but not only are they doing that, they're botching. I mean, it's a different thing if you do, they're moving a little bit more to the left, but they actually execute things and they somehow turn out good. At this point in time, those things are not happening. It would be a completely different story if philosophically or ideologically you didn't agree with something and it just ended up working, but it's not what you would have preferred. It's a different thing if they're doing a thing and it's completely failing. So in many ways, that's my current philosophy right now, but we'll see. Let's see. Let me add questions. Okay. Will Kathy Hochul win 2022 governor election? I think at this point in time, it's something that's possibly going to happen. Kathy Hochul is someone who she's trying her best, and I think that she's probably going to be able to win. She's incumbent governor, and I think she could get the name, but I think it's something that's very interesting. I'm not sure if this is the actual ready go, but if this is, welcome to the live stream. Let's see. Let's answer more questions. Am I pro-life or pro-choice? So when it comes to this issue, I'm someone who is, philosophically and morally, I'm pro-life. I mean, I think that we should not be killing babies. However, I think that there is parts of the issues that, I think it's not, my place to discuss, right? But I think that one of the things that I think should be done instead is avoid pregnancies that, are unwanted in the first place. And it could be hard. And of course, there's always those certain, cases, right, with rape and things like that. And, there's things that can be done to prevent that. There is anti-conceptive pills. There could be more, birth control that could actually be free and given out and things like that could help protect, citizens and women from having to go through an abortion. But, I think that a general perspective, until those measures aren't taken, the preventive side of it, people are just going to go off and, abort their babies. And I mean, it's not my place. And I mean, it's a hard decision for many women. But, at a moral level, I think I'm pro-life, religiously and things like that. But, at a philosophical level, I think that it's an interesting issue. How would you grade Trump's presidency? So, I think that Trump's presidency was, I think, somewhere around the 7.5 out of 10 range. I think like a C grade. Why am I putting it like this? I think that he could have been a lot careful with his rhetoric and things like that. And truly, I think that is something that caused certain issues, at least at an international level with our allies. And even domestically, it caused some issues. However, his policies, I think, 99% were on point, and I think it's something that's pretty good. How would I grade the Biden presidency right now? I think that the Biden presidency right now, if I were to give it a grade today, I would probably give it a high F. I mean, they passed COVID relief, which I mean has exploded back on our face. But, it's something. They passed the infrastructure bill. But other than that, the last couple of things they've done over the last span of the last month and a half, complete disaster. And people are like raving, oh, the economy is doing so well. No, it's not. 200,000 new jobs is nothing compared to where we should be. And 200,000 new jobs in an economy that has millions of job openings is completely horrible. Inflation through the roof. You can't tell me that, your gas prices are the same as they were a couple of months back. That going out to the grocery store, it's going to cost you the same for the same groceries. It's simply not the case. And I'm here speaking on fact. And I mean, this is kind of the things that is making the left move further away from the center. Many independents are mad because, the simple fact of the country is that we're in a poor state. And I'm going to give Biden a chance. I mean, he has definitely the opportunity to turn it around. I mean, it's never too late to judge, right? But if things look right now, Biden is doing a horrible job as president, in my opinion. But again, that might just be me, and I mean, everyone's allowed to have their opinions. Well, Jude, I think that you're not getting the fact. African Americans are getting vaccinated at some rate. However, there is a big amount of vaccine hesitancy. I saw data, for example, from New York City. 75% of African Americans in New York City are currently not vaccinated. And, there's different factors that come to it. But we have to remember that historically, these communities have been at least at a, health level and things like that. They've been used as like, lab rats. And then what happened? And the government used them as lab rats. What's going to happen? They're not going to trust the government and things like that. So long term, those things have impacts. And that's like one of the things that I think clearly, like, from the past, from history, that, I think that, for example, a lot of the things behind the Black Lives Matter movement are, not, I would say, how do I say this? It's not 100% kind of what I think is accurate, but I think with the vaccines and vaccinations, I think that, for example, it's more of a thing that you could say, yes, I think this is certainly a thing that, makes sense, because if you're being used as lab rats for a vaccine, Tuskegee, you're going to mistrust the government. That's not a real thing. Now in New York, they're saying you have to be vaccinated to any after-school program. And that's what's coming across the nation in Democratic states for the most part, where we're going to see a big vaccine mandates. Los Angeles County has just announced that they are going to be requiring, vaccines for students that are 12 or older. Many states are flirting around with the idea. And with Biden, what Biden just did with the 100, employee rule, if you have more than 100 employees, everyone has to be vaccinated or subject to testing. Those things are coming. Now, I think something interesting that's coming from this is the very likely amount of, political tension building up between governors from some Republican states and the Biden administration, because there is Republican states that have already come out and said, we're not going to let this happen, and they're going to be suing the government. And ultimately, I think a lot of these vaccine mandate things, in my opinion, are not, the right way to go with it. But I think that it's been done in other countries. It's been done in France. It's been done in many different parts of the world. But for the U.S. and it's fascinating. And I think that one of the things is that the U.S. has been always the pronounced, image of freedom, and I think it kind of takes away from that. Let's see. What if GOP go more on identity politics and more appealing to immigration policies? If the GOP start appealing more to identity politics and immigration policies, ultimately, one, I think that their base wouldn't really care because, it's whatever they say is right, which I think is another thing I find ridiculous about politics is that, Democrats and Republicans, whatever their base says goes. I mean, there's never a questioning of your own side even. And I think that's something that's somewhat important to certain levels. Now, if the GOP were to do this, I think they could win more elections. I think that the Sun Belt would be more, safe towards her part. And I think that moving forward, identity politics is what they're going to try to do. Let me ask you, who do you guys think is a rising star or the biggest rising star in the GOP? And the easy answer to that is Tim Scott. He has built so much fundraising power, simply because he's an African-American voice in the GOP. That really is going to end up helping me out. You think the Trump chances of running have definitely increased recently? If you asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said DeSantis. I completely agree. I think a lot of people are looking back at the 2020 election and saying, crap, Trump probably wasn't that bad. And I think that at a big level, it's more because Biden has been failing miserably. And I mean, if you're a Democrat and you still stand by Biden, I get it. If there's moments that you want to stand back because, you supported a cause for so long. But at a general perspective, as an independent personally, you can really tell that the situation in the country has worsened. And I think that there is really no way of hiding it. I mean, and what we really have seen is the rise of culture war, where we're seeing the Democrats are always being perceived as the quote unquote liars or exaggerating, certain issues. And I mean, the Republicans do it too. But the way that kind of the whole country right now is set up politically, with the populism being popular and things like that, little by little, Democrats are losing support in certain areas because of, the media kind of being caught in bed with them and things like that are moving forward in. I'm going to be honest with you. These are going to be things that are going to be very impactful when it comes to the 2024 election. And a new poll that came out had 20% of Joe Biden voters regretting their decision. I mean, that doesn't mean that 20% of Biden voters aren't going to vote for Democrats again, but that does mean that there will probably be some repercussions to, what's been happening. Let's see. You're only pro-choice when it comes to rape. That's kind of where I stand, on the issue. Let's see. I'm kind of behind on commentary. You guys know how it goes. So I'm going to try to get to you guys. No man has a right to tell a woman what to do with her body. If a man gets a woman pregnant when she is not ready to have a baby, then the man should have testes clipped. It's ticked. I think this is an issue again that like I'm not personally the right person to talk about it, but I think that at a general level, if you do think about it, I think that if you're consenting to sexual activity, you're also consenting to pregnancy in certain ways. And if the right protections are not taken, that's kind of what I was getting to with the more preventive measures. And I mean, keep it open to a certain level to those specific cases. It's something that should be considered. And to your next point, I don't think Trump has destroyed a democracy. I think that's something that has been over exaggerated by a lot of the left. And the Republicans are not angels either. But I will say that Donald Trump has been, I would say, a savior when it comes to U.S. politics in stopping the establishment. I mean, from taking power forever. And I mean, if it was Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump, that populist non-establishment figure was necessary. And I think to many extents, I mean, Donald Trump has actually built our democracy in many ways. And I don't see other than there's the argument that Trump destroyed democracy. I don't really get it, because a lot of people point to January 6th and say that's all Trump's fault. And I mean, I think it's exaggerated in many ways how people say he incited the violence. I think that he could have been more careful, but ultimately those were his supporters. I mean, it doesn't matter it's not your fault if your supporters, you're not liable for your supporters. Let's see. Which had a bigger impact on 2020 election? Black Lives Matter or COVID? Okay, easily it was COVID, because COVID is an issue that everyone faces, an issue that was big nationwide. And, ultimately, I think that COVID just ended up being a bigger issue because it was more impactful on people's life. Black Lives Matter was an afterthought. And I think what Black Lives Matter really did well was get out African-American communities to go out and vote. And that's pretty much how I would say the Democrats won in Georgia. That was a very big part of it. Let's see. You really needed to be back to do two things before COVID. And I get that, right? But the difference is that these vaccines before, they were completely tested. And I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm very pro-vaccine. Again, if you haven't gotten your vaccines, go get them now because you need to go get COVID vaccine. I would recommend it. I personally recommend it. But if people do have, their things about the vaccine, which again, I don't blame them because these vaccines were rushed through the process. I mean, they've been proven to be safe by the studies we have now, and they're likely not going to have as big of an impact. But there's some people that just want to be sure. And I think that people, are to a certain extent over-exaggerating that. But I think it's disgusting what the government's doing. And, COVID is different than it's more like the flu vaccine than measles or these other big disease. So I think in that sense, it's something that really should be up to the person because not everyone's required to take the flu vaccine, right? It's highly recommended, but there's people who choose not to take it, right? With COVID, I think it's even more than that. I mean, if you don't take the flu vaccine, it's probably because you even didn't know about it or you didn't have the time. But with the COVID vaccine, I mean, it's really open to kind of what everyone wants to do. And I think that when it really comes down to it, I would say until a couple of years that if it's still a big thing, you have to require it. But at this point, people do have the right of, being skeptical of the vaccine. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to encourage that people get vaccinated. So I hope that kind of made sense of where I stand with that. If the Cuomo scandals never came out, do you think Cuomo would run in 2024? Absolutely. I think Cuomo is banking on that. I think Cuomo wanted to run for president for such a long time. And ultimately, 2024 was going to be his chance after his popularity from COVID, after the Biden presidency. And ultimately, I think it's something that, didn't end up working out because he was a pretty bad person after all. Let's see. The president of the United States' job is to make sure the health of the people. How about polio? Millions of children died from polio until the vaccine. And of course, but I think we're also dealing with a very different pandemic with COVID. Yes, people are dying, and it's definitely sad. But what we have to understand is that at general level, people die from illnesses, especially new illnesses that we still do not know a lot about. We've gotten to know a lot more about COVID as time has progressed, but we still do not know everything. And the vaccines could help. And ultimately, like it comes down to the individual. In my opinion, again, and this could be if this could be your opinion, but the president has, he has a responsibility of trying to get more people vaccinated, but it's also not his place to completely say and dictate that you must get the vaccine before you enter normal society. Because to be honest with you, it's not necessary. I think that, with the big vaccination rate we have already, the people that have their, hesitancies with vaccines, it's in my opinion, it's okay because they're probably hesitant on that vaccine because it truly was rushed. And I mean, in many ways, when a vaccine is rushed, there could be errors that people didn't catch. Again, studies have shown different things, but I don't really blame them. And I think it's disgusting what the government's trying to do and what a lot of celebrities are trying to do, that they're trashing not anti-vaxxers, but people who haven't gotten vaccinated. But there is a fear instilled in some people. But, I think that what needs to happen is that this problem needs to be taken away from the government and people make the individual choice. When people get vaccinated and things like that, that's a better way. And I think that if we're already at that point where everyone knows at least one or actually more people that have gotten vaccinated. So I think that the last percentage point, and we've been stuck at vaccine rates for a really long time. We're going up very, very narrowly. It's for a reason. It's because people don't trust the vaccine. And ultimately, I mean, I don't blame them. You can't isolate them from society because it's going to have long-term impacts on the economy and the social structure in the United States. Let's see. Well, case law is not on the mandate side because it's pretty dangerous when you start talking about things like the worker privacy laws and things like that. It starts getting at that. I mean, ultimately, the Department of Labor has a lot of push on that, but there could be lawsuits and it could become a big issue. I wouldn't be surprised if this mandate thing goes to the Supreme Court. Just saying that right now. Well, Tim Scott has become a rising star in the Republican Party, believe it or not. And I mean, trust me, if Donald Trump runs in 2024, I really do see him picking Tim Scott because he has done a lot of good fundraising numbers. And I think, honestly, if you look at the things in the past, he's probably a pick that he would choose. Let's see. In the 60s, 70s, if COVID could have hit then, the schools would have given each and every kid the vaccine without notifying parents. I mean, the problem is that we're no longer in that era. And I think that to many big extent, it's within the parents' right to get notified of the vaccine. Why does 70% of GDP come from blue counties? Well, because the blue counties are bigger in the state. And I think that it's also because you have to think about it. The big companies are settled in these areas, but without everywhere else in the country, the GDP wouldn't be produced in those counties. But the economy, I think if you're trying to talk about the economy, and this doesn't really matter because ultimately, yes, the GDP will come from the blue counties because there's just more people there. But ultimately, the economy is not in a good state right now. And there's past Democrats have done a very good job with the economy, but Joe Biden is diving the economy down. And I mean, the economy was doing pretty well until COVID. And even then, Donald Trump was on a road to recovery. But with a lot of the things that Biden has been pushing, some of the failures, giving out more money when he shouldn't have, when extending the eviction moratorium when he shouldn't have, those things are having big issues. Let's see. Well, Trump did many things. He got a peace deal in the Middle East, and we're about to completely get out of the Middle East without anything happening. Donald Trump made sure the economy was growing. I mean, there's a lot of things that I could tell you Trump did. He cut taxes. He made sure that investment was back in the U.S. He built international relations with our adversaries to the point that we didn't have to worry about wars. I remember during the last days of the Obama presidency, we were all worried about North Korea. Donald Trump was able to fix that situation. And ultimately, that's something I really commend about Trump. He could have been very bad rhetoric-wise. He could have been very dividing. He could have been these different things. But, I do think that to a big extent, Donald Trump was very effective. And I think that he's done, a lot more effective things than Biden. And here's the thing. Like I was saying before, it's a thing that I personally, as an independent, I don't really mind. I mean, if who really is in power, as long as they're getting the job done and they're moving America forward. I don't care if you're left or right, but as long as your policies are working to some extent and they're really coming into fruition, it's okay. And I mean, with Biden, we're not seeing that. So and that's something that Trump did. And I mean, there's other reasons why you might not like Trump, probably his personality and things like that. But I don't think he was a bad president. I think people over exaggerate, and some people are just on social media, or they're here the mainstream media, which I think is the most corrupt place on both the left and the right, where we see a big amount of influence to where not should it be. Biden's in trouble. One poll says 20%. Exactly. Biden is in trouble in 24, and he is really going to have to see what is going to do about it, because he either needs to fix his policies or figure out some magical way to win a lot of those supporters back, because 20% of Biden voters, not all of them will leave, but even if 10 or 5% of them leave him, it's still a pretty big number. That's somewhere, I could probably relate with, support BLM, believe in climate change, but limited governing capitalism and our constitutional rights. And I think that, I think these are things that are very important in society. Let's see. It's killed more than 650,000 people in less than a year. But and of course, that is a very big and bad number for the country. Now, what we have to think about as well is that there's other things that were, correlated with this. And I would say there's some corruption with a lot of those numbers, because there's people that could have gone to the hospital. They had like sometimes aftermath of COVID, sometimes it was COVID itself. But in many cases, it was just pre-existing conditions that really ended up killing people. And unfortunately, the reality of it is that there was like going to be deaths in those areas anyways. And I think that we need to really think about the fact that 650,000 people is a bad number, but every time there's been a big pandemic like this, things like this have happened. And I think that to a certain extent, it's been controlled. I mean, we have to remember this is a very aggressive illness. This is something that it's very hard to control. And we could believe everything the scientists say, and I say believe in the science. But the big reality is that it's still a new thing and it's very hard to control. So, I mean, 650,000 people dead, right? That's pretty bad. But you still have to think about it in that other lens. And I think I'm very informed of the virus. So, I mean, you could disagree with what I'm saying, but I think I'm pretty informed. Do you think that Taliban will ever be overthrown? I really don't think so. I think the U.S. learned its lesson, and I don't think anyone else is going to have, the balls to go on and overthrow the Taliban. And truly, I don't know why someone would have the interest of, overthrowing the Taliban. What do I think about Senator Warnock? Senator Warnock, I think, is actually a very interesting figure. I kind of like him. I think he's actually a good figure for moving the country forward. And, he might be on the liberal side of things. And, and maybe more than I'm comfortable with kind of in the center. But, I think that one of the things he's good at is that he has liberal policies, but they're not with the establishment. And that's something right now that I'm not really digging. I'm digging stuff that's not so much establishment politics, because I think that is the epitome of bad government. I think that the country has lived in establishment politics for so long that, I think it's necessary to think outside the box. I think it's necessary to, move forward with a lot of these things, because I think ultimately, if we don't start thinking about this out of the box, and we're still with the same people who have been in government for years and years on both Democrat and Republican sides, nothing will ever get done, because it's the same ideas, the same people controlling everything, and that's not a way to build the country forward. It's a way to bring the country down. And ultimately, I think that people like Senator Warnock and people like AOC, I may not agree with them politically 100%, but I do, agree that there needs to be some new form of government, sort of like what Trump is doing and some other Republicans in the new camp of thought have been doing. So I think it's something that's very interesting. So at this point in time, I think it's something that's actually very interesting. Let's see. We were in an industrial recession before COVID, but that was getting fixed. The industrial recession began in 2016. And before 2016, that was a big reason why Trump won. If it wasn't for that, Hillary Clinton would have easily won the election. I think it's getting more towards the economic, type of thing. So I think it's something that's, interesting to know. But the industrial recession was starting to get little by little better. Donald Trump did fix North Korea in the sense that, they're still communist and they're still all those things, but they were not an imminent threat like they were threatening to under the Obama administration. And ultimately, I think it was just out of good foreign policy. Him being able to go and sit down with Kim Jong-un and going on and, talking about the situation, I think that was really able to help ease the tensions. And that's something that is, I would say, a pretty big, win for the U.S., because the country, to many extent, was in a period of very bad tensions with North Korea. We were this close, I would say, of getting into nuclear war with them. Let's see. Overall, I think it was a mistake for Trump to cut taxes. Most economists agree that you tax taxes when the economy is bad and raise them when it's good. I mean, I think that's a reasonable take. Now, I think that if I would say there was a mistake in Trump cutting taxes, I mean, to a certain extent, the timing of it could have been better, but I think that another thing that he should have focused on is that he should have united the country. He should have said, let's get infrastructure done first. We could have had support from everyone across the aisle and he would have been super popular. That's what the political thing to do would have been. I mean, cutting taxes is not a bad thing. And I think to a certain extent, if you wanted to kickstart the economy, it could have been a positive thing to lower those taxes. But then in the long term, cutting taxes is going to give you moments like this, where the country is in complete debt and completely ridiculous. Let's see. Oh, thank you so much for the super chat, William. So your question is, what will the bigger impact on the midterm elections? What will have a bigger impact on midterm elections? The Republican effort to limit access to the polls or their hard right state health policies? So, I think that out of these two policies, what really could end up being, the biggest thing for the Democrats, and I think this is truly what they're going to end up focusing on, is the voting rights. I mean, yes, the things in the state houses could have importance in some statewide races, like some of the governor's races. But I think overall, the voting rights is something that could face more challenges simply because it's somewhere I think that the Democrats are going to be more pushing on. Now, I think that the real reality of it is, in a big sense, is that I don't really think that the especially I would say at least with the voting rights, which I think is what the Democrats are going to focus on, it's not going to have a big impact on a lot of independents and things like that, because the only people that really, really, really care about those issues are people who are Democrats already. So if I was, a Democratic strategist and I would have to go on and create a policy, that if I had to probably say something about the Republicans, I would focus about some other region, because I would probably focus on the hard right state house policies, because I think that could be easier thing to, campaign on. Let's see. You think Texas is only tended to the left because of Trump? I think a moderate, more traditional Republican was the nominee. It would go back to a strong red state. And I mean, I think this is the thing that's been happening in a lot of places. I mean, there's been this Trump type effect where, because of Trump's rhetoric, because of Trump's, policies and the way he, managed himself, those are things that had pretty big impacts. And I think that at a general perspective, the state of Texas is a state that ultimately is conservative. There might be a growing population of Democrats, and there's actually very big trends of that in places like San Antonio, places like Houston, places like Dallas. Now, I think that with that comes the fact that there's a lot of voters who were not happy with Trump, and I think it's something that's very interesting. Do you think Larry Elder could actually win the recall election in California? I highly doubt it at this point. I mean, Gavin Newsom's probably going to end up winning. Who knows? It could be the surprise of our lives. But right now, if I had to put my money on it, I would think it would be more on the Gavin Newsom side of the race. Will Stacey Abrams run for president in the future? I think definitely at some point, probably in the next 20 to 30 years, but who even knows at this point? We don't know what happens tomorrow, what can happen in 30, 40, 50 years. Would Ohio, Montana, and West Virginia Senate seats surely flip red in 2024? So I think that the interesting thing here is going to be to see, where popularity-wise these Democrats are. And I think that with excitement in 2024, it could, be bad for them because of the down ballot effect. Out of these three, if I had to choose one to flip, I would more likely say Ohio, although Sherrod Brown is super, super popular. Montana, I think there's the possibility of, the seat flipping. And West Virginia could get close, but Joe Manchin is popular. So I'm not 100% sure of that, and I'm going to have to see how the situations evolve to give you a better answer, right? How is Arizona such a centrist state? I mean, it's interesting, and I think it just comes down to it's Maricopa County, which is a big city, and it has I would say pretty big Democratic areas like in Tucson and things like that. And it has a very far, conservative areas. And then the moderate part in Maricopa County is what really does, move the needle. And ultimately, I think that's ultimately why it's so close. Let's see. Do you think Josh Hawley can win the presidential election? I mean, I think that Josh Hawley could have a chance. I'm not 100% sure he could win 100%. It depends on the candidate. I think that he has potential winning in the Midwest, but he probably would have to win some state in the Sun Belt, and I really doubt, especially, maybe against Joe Biden, but against other Democrats, like, if you haven't watched the short I made, other, possibilities maybe. Let's see. How would the U.S.-China relationship if Nixon didn't open relationships? It's something interesting, but something, again, I can't answer because that would be too much of hypotheticals going back way too long. So, it would be interesting to see what actually play out because I think we would be in a completely different relationship based on ideals and things like that. But, the Chinese have always been, even in their ancient ages, they've been, a government that has been very big on trade and things like that. So there would certainly be some type of business relationship. Should Biden be impeached for the Afghanistan crisis? I personally do not think so. And here's my reasoning. What happened in Afghanistan was horrible, and the execution of it was completely horrendous. Now, what I will say is that I think it's just an example of military crises that presidents have, regardless. I mean, every president had some type of crisis militarily. And I mean, I give Biden a lot of credit for trying to pull out of Afghanistan. Now, I don't give him credit for doing it horribly. I mean, I think it's something that has to be given credit for because Bush, Obama, and Trump did not do that. Trump was rolled. He was about to do it, but his generals decided to look out for their personal interests and not look out for the country's interests. And they rolled Trump. They said, you can't do that. They're going to attack us. And I mean, who knows? They might have been right or they might have been wrong. With Obama, he just never decided to do it because he was too busy, fighting and nation building. And I think it's something that's kind of important. Let's see. You live in California, and only 3% if voters have returned their mail-in ballots, and Republicans and Independents are more likely to vote on the day of the election. Yeah, I mean, but wasn't this a whole mail-in election? I may be wrong, but if I understand, it was a whole by-mail election. Again, I may be wrong. Elder is no Schwarzenegger. Newsom is more popular than Davis was. And again, this is something I agree with. I mean, Elder is really going to appeal to those conservative voters. And ultimately, what's going to be the needle here is it going to be a yes on recall or no on recall? Because the reason of this being is that for some reason, and I still can't perceive why they did this, the Democrats said to leave the ballot blank, the replacement ballot. And I mean, politically speaking, why would you do that? I mean, I'm overly perplexed because why would you give the Republicans a chance of winning? I mean, yes, you don't want Newsom to get recalled, but at least put something on the ballot so he doesn't lose the race because that's who you want to win, the Democrats. So, and again, Elder is popular, and if he does get elected, it's going to be simply because he had a majority of the vote amongst very conservative bases that are excited to go out to vote. Let's see. The Democrats came out completely against coal, and Biden was more extreme on other issues, extreme than some other on that issues. And I think I agree. I mean, I remember that one of the worst things Biden, did during his campaign, and I think he could have had better margins in the election if he did not do this, was the comments about fracking in the debates. He completely failed at answering the question and really hurt the coal industry. So, that is that. In 2024, Sherrod Brown will hold on, but Joe Manchin and Tester would go home. I think that it's something that is likely to probably happen, but who knows? You disagree, but no problem. I like answering questions, and sometimes I actually like having these different perspectives with different people because it inhibits discussion, and I think it's important because then we can see different perspective on different issues and probably think of things that we haven't thought, personally. Let's see. I don't think Afghanistan was impeachable, but vaccine mandates are our thoughts. I agree with this. I mean, Afghanistan was just poor military strategy, and I mean, things that comes with being commander-in-chief. And the Afghanistan situation, in my eyes, kind of felt also kind of when, Democrats were 100% talking about impeachment, when the Democrats wanted to impeach Donald Trump for every little thing he did. But vaccine mandates, that could be impeachable. I mean, that's getting close to being unconstitutional. Maybe wrong, but I think that the vaccine mandates definitely are. I do agree with you there. Let's see. And yeah, again, at the end of the day, it's not going to matter. You're right, because unless you do something completely horrible, you're not going to get removed from office. So it really does not matter. Biden will be impeached no matter what he does because of the partisanship in House. He could get impeached. I mean, he just won't get removed. I mean, and I think he could certainly get impeached if the Republicans win the House in 2022. Something that could happen. Let's see. How close do the margins have to be in California, Rico, for Democrats to get worried? I would say in polling data, probably less than 5%. Because you know how polling data skews, right? So I think that if the Democrats are 5%, the real rate of actual election results could be anywhere from as little as 2% or as high as 8%. So probably somewhere around there. Let's see. If a terrorist attack happened, would Biden approval rating go up or down? It's too hard to tell because, again, there's a lot of different factors. If it's directly vinculated to the Taliban, you can assume those rates are going to go down and down horribly. If it's some other group and there's no vinculation to anything else Biden has done, they could go up because of the unite around the leader. Well, they're unconstitutional in some ways because it infringes on people's freedoms and in the Bill of Rights and things like that. And you know, this is the Bill of Rights, not necessarily, but there's other parts of the Constitution and the whole message the Constitution is permeating. And these mandates, he's regulating businesses and what they need to do with their employees. And again, there are certain things. If you want to, do the vaccine mandate amongst the military, that's fine. Want to do it amongst government employees, that's fine. They're government employees. They have to abide by what you say. You're the boss of the government. But going into private businesses enforced by the Department of Labor, I think it's gone too far. Private businesses could choose to enforce those rules, and a lot of them are doing anyways. But, I think it's really infringent on, those rights. Thank you, Matthew. I mean, this is something I don't like talking about a lot of the, what if scenarios with terrorism. And I think that we're very far away from a terrorist attack happening, in my opinion. Who knows? I could be wrong. But I think we're looking a little bit farther away from that. Let's see. What happened in Afghanistan would have never happened under Trump. I think that it's likely that it would have played out different in the sense that Trump probably would have said, get everyone out, because I think it's something he would have done. And ultimately what ended up happening with Biden is his, Department of Defense, his generals, were waiting until the last minute so they could try to stay in, because remember, these people have interest there. These people have, lots of lobbying. These people have a lot of these different things from defense companies. And, they were playing the mafia game, right? And with Trump, I think he would have said to his generals, okay, you need to stop the BS, because if you don't, you guys are going to be completely screwed. And I think it would have been a little bit different under Trump, the whole getting out, and the peace deal with the Taliban certainly would have helped, because I think in many ways the Taliban could have seen Trump, as the, or Biden as, if Trump's not president anymore, so who cares? So I think it could have been different in some ways. Let's see. Mitt Romney probably was not going to win in 2012. I mean, I think that he didn't have the popularity to do in many different ways. So I don't think he would have been, elected. Well, the Kurds is an example of, what, so again, military failure by Trump. But I think the Afghanistan situation would have been a little bit different from the Kurd situation in the sense that this was more planned. And I think that, with the control, a peaceful takeover of power, right? From, or not rather takeover of power from the Taliban, but, leaving the government set up in a good way, it was going to happen. And I think that the difference is American interests, which are the American people, they would have been out of there. And, Afghan translators would likely left the country too. Now, I think people in many instances don't remember that a lot of this wasn't the U.S. government's fault. It was the Afghanistan army and Afghanistan government, the old one, deciding, oh, you guys are leaving? Well, bye. I'm going to, sell everything. I'm going to sell off to the Taliban and let me get a bunch of money and leave. That's what the president of Afghanistan did. So I think it's something that's important. Let's see. What do I think about the vaccine mandate? So I kind of talked about that a little bit. I think that it's pretty tyrannical in my opinion, because I mean, especially and more towards the private business one, because You can send vaccine mandates for the government. That's fine. You're the head of the government. You can send vaccine mandates in some other places. But once you start messing with private businesses and things like that, and what the policies of businesses are, you start, running into issues. And ultimately, I know it's a push to get people vaccinated, but I don't think it's a good way to, get people vaccinated. That might just be me, but who knows? Yeah, if Mitt Romney won in 2012, he would have been a one-term president and probably would have helped, Hillary Clinton do a lot better come 2016. So let's see. You think Herschel Walker would end up unseating Warnock by a very close margin? It depends. I think that it has to be a real situation where, the Democrats lose a lot of support in Georgia, which I doubt, because what we see in Georgia is, is the fact that, the Democrats have built such a good base with a lot of voters. They're anti-Trump and anti-Trump policies. And I think ultimately that's going to stick. You mean like DeSantis is messing with privacy who wants a mandate? I mean, no, because DeSantis, he doesn't want to give vaccine passports, which is a government thing where, they could mandate vaccines. But again, a private, business stance, what Biden is doing is way more dangerous than what DeSantis is doing, because ultimately businesses still have the right in Florida. If they want to, they can ask you. And ultimately what we have to think about the Florida situation is what DeSantis is doing really has no impact, because people are going to do whatever they want anyways, because it's really not regulated. The Department of Labor and that mandate is regulated. So it's different. And, DeSantis in that sense with the mandates and things like that, he's just playing, people politics. But with the nationwide one, with the Department of Labor enforcing it, it's real. And, and the mandate is an imposition. I agree with this. And I think that is, something that's interesting. And Ronald Reagan, to ask your question, yes, I'm Catholic. But, generally speaking, I think that this whole freedom debate and things like that is very interesting because, I think that it's not okay for someone to be, required to be vaccinated to enter somewhere, with some exceptions. I think if you're going to go on a cruise, you need to be vaccinated unless you're under the age of 12. That's like one of the places where I kind of disagree with the DeSantis. He should have just let the cruise industry have the vaccine thing, but they're pretty much doing it anyways with the vaccine requirements. At a general perspective, I think it's not necessarily everywhere else, because we survived during the pandemic without people getting vaccinated, and we were perfectly fine. Florida is an example. We opened up, our cases went down, and it was fine, and no one was vaccinated because there was no vaccines back then. And people are now vaccinated, so I don't see what the big issue with the vaccines are. I mean, it's important to get people vaccinated because, of course, you don't want people to get the hard trend of COVID. But, it's something. Okay. No, I understand that you can be tested instead, but I mean, it's up to the employers. And ultimately, you know what this is? This is, a cost for not only the employee, but to the employer as well. And that could lead to many other issues, for workers and, workers' rights. And I think that a general perspective, this should not be it's not the government's place to say this. If a business wants to impose a vaccine or test requirement, that's completely fine. It's up to them. And I'm not really against vaccines. I'm not really against people getting tested. I'm against the government telling you that you must do it if you have more than 100 employees. I think it's something that should be considered. The COVID deaths are amongst unvaccinated population. Of course, I do get that. But, again, it's people assuming their risk. If they want to get the risk, take the risk and not get vaccinated, they can face the consequences, whether that be getting COVID or getting a tough case of COVID at that. So, I think that is something that's interesting. The government requires a business not to lock the fire door, but this is completely different because this is getting more into regular day operations of a company, because with these requirements, it could really mess with a company's ability to, continue to, to manage itself. Because look, these are more safety and building codes. This is more of a health thing. And I mean, when it comes to health, when the government gets involved, it's a little bit dangerous, but especially with this, I don't think it's a good thing, and it's completely different. Again, safety code, building code is different from daily operations, like requiring COVID tests or requiring employees to be vaccinated, because that actually has a real impact on the productivity of workers, on how many workers you could get in the building and things like that. Because there's in some states workers who are not comfortable getting the vaccine, and I think they're requiring testing. Okay, it's okay, but I think it's not okay the fact that it's mandatory. Companies should have the right. If a company feels okay not requiring it to get the people tested, then fine. But again, it comes down to the government, and I think not the government's place. Businesses have the right to do it if they want to require it for their employees, but the government shouldn't be mandating it. Let's see. I think I missed your question. Let me see. Oh, here it is. Romney ran as moderate in 2012, and I think it resulted in the far-right conservative base not voting large margins. And I think that's a big truth, right? And I think that kind of costed him the election. But I think ultimately Barack Obama was in a very big wave of popularity, and ultimately would have done very well. Again, this is getting into different things, and these are labor laws, and I mean, it's different things. These are labor laws pertaining to what employees are allowed, and these are labor rights. Now, it's not impacting, and of course, these are things that are common sense. With the vaccine requirements, with the government forcing you to do so, it's not the same thing, because it's something that companies should have the choice of saying, well, we think that we're fine, so it's not required. So this is the government overstepping their boundaries. And I mean, I get you might agree with Biden on most issues, but I think that ultimately it's not the government's place to require things like that. COVID deaths are 5/6 from the elderly and 1/6 from mostly unhealthy. So the death rate from COVID is a hair over 1%. So what do you want with those numbers? And I kind of agree with this. I mean, unfortunately, it's more elderly people because their health systems are more compromised, right? And of course, you don't want anyone to die, but the sad reality of it is that at some point, these people could have had pre-existing conditions and things like that, and it could have been the flu, it could have been some other type of illness, it could have knocked them out as well. And I'm saying this with the most respect possible, right? And COVID is like any other illness. If you have pre-existing conditions and you get pneumonia, for example, you could die. And I mean, it's the real reality. Right, and a vaccine mandate, that's where we're getting to. Those are people that are retired. Those are people, you know what I mean? But I think that at another general perspective, it's not a thing that the government should get, in, right? The Republican Party presidential candidates won 45 to 47% of the popular in 08, 12, 16, and 20, all in two candidate races. This is not road to future success. Well, I mean, to a certain extent, it's not popular. Winning the popular is a thing that the Republicans don't need to, right? Because of the Electoral College. But I think to a certain extent, it also just is because Democrats have control of the large areas of population. Of course, those areas are growing rapidly, and with that, you're going to see those lowering of popular vote rates. But then the thing about the U.S. system, it's also kind of weird because you could be winning by 100%. No, well, you can't win by 100%, but you can win by 30 points of the popular vote. But if you get really unlucky, you could actually just win by a couple electoral votes because that's just how the election played out. Let's see. Last question, because I know it's 10 p.m. Places like California turning out Democratic electorates is what the cost of GOP. Okay, exactly. That is kind of what is causing the electoral vote of the popular vote. I kind of explained that. And last question from Soapmore. Could you address the question at the very beginning? Will the GOP make gains in the House and the Senate? So I do think that the GOP will definitely make House gains because simply of the fact that they're probably going to have more excitement. Redistricting, things like that are really going to help them out in the midterms. As for the Senate, I think it's going to be pretty tough. I think that the GOP has the opportunity to make gains. Now, it's very dependent on how they do it. But I think it's certainly a possibility. Well, I do see possibilities for Democrats to make a big help as well. So, guys, I want to thank you guys so much for watching today, and I hope you guys really enjoy this live stream. I really enjoyed discussing with you guys, especially the COVID mandates and things like that. Have a discussion with Jude, with Soapmore, with everyone else that's been here. Waylon, Political Playground, William, Matthew Tor, Gabe. Everyone who's stuck to the end, and anyone else who's watching. And if you're watching and so a replay, I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. Guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, and turn up post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and goodbye.